template, and then they had decided that they wanted to use the clicking format because it automatically generates the structured report, and they thought that that would be faster for them. So this is, we spent the last month, but then intensively last week or a week and a half ago, working through and going through everything so that they were comfortable with it. So this is where we're at now, and each of the boxes actually have an English text box or different options, which we've really tested over a long period of time. You won't be seeing that, but that lies behind that that CT form. So that's all I have to say, unless anybody has questions.
That sounds great. We're looking forward to getting the rest of the changes that you guys have been working so hard on.
Well, there's a whole structure. There's a whole text structure to generate the structured report, which I don't think you've started on. So that's why the fields, the positioning of the fields, and the order, and the all of that has been worked out and tested, you know, over several years, because you want to make sure that that all combinations work out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's something that we are looking forward to getting.
Yeah. This is Rick. This is Rick. I think it's important to just bring up the big picture first. So basically, we are trying to wrap up all the feature requests that are coming into VA PALS, and we view basically the CT eval form as one of the most important things to get all the data entry values right and all of the reports right and everything right. So what we're really watching here is a work in progress that we're about to do of the CT eval form after quite a long time, as Claudia said, working with Michelle Dorsey and Dr. Michelle Dorsey and Dr. Robert Iger, I believe it is.
No, Brian Iger and Vanessa with a long name, and Ryan Slaughter. So there have been 4 radiologists that have been deeply involved and are using the format right now already for their CT reports.
Yes. So what we have going on now is that we've taken the inputs that we got from Phoenix. Dom has created the UI, the front end, of the first version of all the changes that have been requested, and we're about to see them. And we also understand that there are other radiologists who will comment on these and give suggestions and things like that. But at this point in time, we have a work in progress, which is pretty far along, and after a lot of work between the different groups. Well,
and just to make the lung rats people feel comfortable, there's a code at the end of the report just where the impression is given. It's automatically actually generated from the data entry. The impression is automatically generated according to the ILCAP protocol, but there's a place for the lung RADS protocol, and we can then, after we get this at least working with then we can add additional fields to make the lung RADS people happy.
Right, right. So Dom, why don't you take over and I guess get hold of that talking stick and start showing off what we got.
Okay, I think I have the talking stick. And I'm sharing my screen, so hopefully everybody can see it.
Yes.
Yep.
So this is zoomed in quite a bit. I was talking to Rick a little earlier. And I guess
excuse me, this is Dr. Chenoweth. Should we be seeing something now? I'm having a lot of trouble, I think, connecting to this WebEx.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen now, so you should see it.
At least some of us are able to see it.
Yeah, I'm able to see it. What are you already in?
Well, I get this screen that says Cisco Meeting Center was unable to connect to the meeting. Please check your network connection and then click retry. Also, when I try to log in, I get umpteen invalid security certificate pop-ups.
But you connected last time, right?
It took a long time, but eventually did. but I don't seem to be having any luck today.
What if you retry now? Have you tried that already?
Yeah, I've tried it multiple times. So I don't want to hold things up, so just go ahead. But, you know, maybe in the future we could consider something that's maybe a little bit more compatible with VA computer, like Skype.
Sure. We'll look at that.
Okay. And I do believe this is being recorded as well, so even after the fact, we can send that out. You can review the video recording of this as well.
That is true. Could you speak just a little bit louder, Dom? You're usually pretty quiet anyway.
Sure, I will speak a little louder.
That is better, thank you.
Let's get started. So based on all the feedback that we got back, you know, I've been using some information that Linda provided from the last week and a half or so. It's nicely documented, so thank you in advance for that. And basically what you're seeing here now on the screen is really the incorporation of almost all of those items. And if we need to, I have a copy of the original CT evaluation form that we currently have on our demo site, so we can use that to kind of compare and contrast what we've changed from what we have available now and versus what's coming in the very near future. So the first couple things that we did here, you probably noticed already that we merged a few of the tabs on the top. So originally we had scan nodules, abnormalities, and follow-up and impression were separate tabs. They're now merged together, and image quality is gone. Also, one of the things that was requested is that the CT study date get pre-filled with today's date. That's happening already here. And I should note, too, that this is purely just, I guess it's a markup, but it's actually...
Hey, Dom, yeah. I don't know if that should be today's date. That should be the date of the study being read.
No, but it's at least a start because they're reading it on. They should be reading it on the same date.
Oh, I see. I got it. Okay, please go. Please continue.
Okay, sure. So we're going to pre-fill that with the study date, and you know that's going to happen here. But what I was trying to say is that these are sort of mock-ups. They're functional mock-ups. There's really nothing that happens when I hit submit right now. I'll talk about what happens after this a little later, but just want to make sure that's clear that right now we're just looking at sample and mock-up data. But the front-end stuff here is all relatively functional. So the study date is pre-filled with today's date. We did remove a couple fields, including exam number that doesn't really have any relevance to VA, and also a checkbox that had a final reading. So that's gone as well. Still to do, and I think that'll have to happen when we start integrating this into the MUM side, is one of the items was that the radiologist should be the currently logged on user. Again, it's mock-up, so there is no logged on user, but that's something that'll get pre-filled, probably in a format that you can't change. Similarly, some of these things like clinical information, one of the comments was that needs to get pre-populated with some information from the VISTA system. And again, this is just front-end stuff, so it's blank for now.
That's important because that's what the insurance, like Michelle Dorsey said, that they also send things out to outside insurers, so then the outside insurers have to have the right information, so we went through that.
Okay. One of the other changes on this main tab here for the scan was that the reconstructed slice thickness is now a drop-down, so you can pick from one of these three common options, or if you hit other, we let you type in some other floating numbers, so you can say, so you could type in whatever you want there. The other thing is
when rescheduling your appointment.
Sorry.
Hello?
One other thing that we that I noticed in the comments is that if you choose baseline from the type of exam, that the baseline CT information gets populated with the CT study date, so you don't have to type it twice.
So why is there a check mark after then the follow-up annual when you click the baseline?
So the check mark is there because you have to choose one of these options. This is kind of, right now it's the way of showing that it's a required field and that it's been validated and that you're okay. So if I were to refresh this and start over and just try to hit submit, you basically have an exit say you have to select something here.
Okay.
That was another topic of discussion, I believe, was differentiating between required and optional fields. That's not in this particular version, but what we're going to do is, rather than indicate which fields are optional, the general way of doing things in a web environment is to mark fields that are required with some asterisks or something like that. So we're going to be doing that across the board. So
but why wouldn't you do that at the beginning? Because it's confusing to see it at the end. Why wouldn't you do that at the beginning where you have type of exam either in front of type of exam or behind type of exam rather than at the end where it's confusing?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying is that for the required fields, we'll be marking them first with a little, if you can see my mouse, I'm not sure if that's shared.
Fine.
But there'll be a little red asterisk next to the required fields, and then if you hit submit, then it gives you some indication that you did something wrong.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I think that's it for this particular tab. I'm going to jump over to the next one for nodules. And here we did take off a couple of fields. Jump to the nodules here. So here we had these total number of non-calcified nodules and total number of nodules. We removed those off the new version. And I won't go through it in great detail because it's relatively complex, but a lot of these fields kind of got moved. Some were removed completely. And again, some of the ones that are now optional, we're going to differentiate that with the red asterisk in front of all those fields.
But what you have where we said that we would put the image series and the image numbers, the series has to come first and then the image number. See where you have that?
Okay.
First we talk about the series and then the image number.
So you're saying series should come first?
Yes.
Okay, that's simple enough to do. But yeah, so I mean, with this tab, there's not a whole lot that really changed here, with the exception of moving things up and down and removing certain fields. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one. We did add this other checkbox on the bottom as well.
No.
Okay, so abnormalities is where a lot of the changes happened, and so we'll start with emphysema. This used to be on the nodules tab, and we decided to move that to abnormalities, and you just see it here. And by default, all these other types of abnormalities, except for abdominal, will be no, and that makes this form much more concise and less intimidating. But if there are, for example, pulmonary abnormalities, just hit yes, and then you can see that whole section. And again, all the required fields will be marked. Let's see, another change was adding this checkbox next to all the comment fields. So for each of these types of abnormalities, there's a box there that says include an impression. And again, I think that's something that's going to have to happen on the Vista side to actually work with that information.
So what does the form look like with it when you just click the default? We used to have one that you could click and it would just zero out everything, call it normal.
Yeah, the notes that I had said that the normal checkbox is not required here. This would be, what you're seeing right here is really the starting point. So if you do nothing else, the required fields is you select something for emphysema. And
oh no, but there are normals that aren't just no's. So there was a normal, there was a button that made that basically said the person was normal, and then you could just click the ones that that you needed to address.
Yeah, we talked about that, and we were going to take the shortcut out, but it sounds like what you want is for the, like where it says gallbladder, to have that already checked as no. That what we're
the shortcut, you have the code for the shortcut. Because it's not just, it's a thought-through shortcut that still says that they're normal and that answers the things. There are things to be answered that are not just yes or no.
Okay.
So I think we just need to go over that again.
Yeah, I have.
But that was very useful because a lot of them are, you know, that helps a lot. It shortens the whole thing by a lot, makes it faster than the dictation, actually.
Yeah, I am familiar with that normal checkbox on the LCAP system. I've seen that work, and we did have that here originally. Actually, I think it's in here.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, just in the notes, it was noted to take it out.
Yeah, I misunderstood what you were wanting. So
if we're going to put that back in, I guess we need to understand what it should be doing. So especially with the abnormalities, do we say that it's no emphysema?
Well, I know, but that's what. Don't you have the code for the what? Don't you have the code for the CT eval form?
I do.
Okay, so you need to check that because I didn't think that all of those things have been tested over a long time. So you know, I don't have them memorized.
Oh, of course.
And it's not just a simple yes or no on everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll pull that back out and fix that. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
So the plan is probably by the end of the week, we'll have a version that you can try out and give more comments and think about it a little bit more as well, because there might be other things you might want to suggest. But anyway, the bottom line is just that this is work in progress. So this is a good set of feedback you're giving. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess this is more of a question than anything. And some of the notes that I gotten back, again, this would be basically the default when you come to this tab for the first time. And there was a note in there that kind of created this new checkbox for parenchymal abnormalities. In talking to Rick, I wasn't really sure how that worked here and how possibly that integrates with some of the pulmonary information here. Basically, the note was that if you say no for parenchymal abnormalities, then abdominal becomes no and collapses all those questions. Just hoping someone could give a little
no. Something there got lost in the translation. So I think we better print out. We'll print out and we'll yeah. No, it's just that the abdominal. They wanted the abdominal things to show so that they would look at the gallbladder, make sure they look at the gallbladder and say yes or no, that it's not hidden. So like you have it where you see gallbladder, spleen, liver, pancreas, so that they give an answer to each of those, whereas they didn't really have to look at all the pulmonary abnormalities. So the way you have it is good.
Okay, great.
I'd have to look at all the other things that you have behind it, but.
Okay. A couple of things in the cardiac section. We added some.
What you also did, which was good, so you defined what mild was in that. So under emphysema, there's none, and there's mild, the displaying of the vessels and scattered blebs and bulli, and moderate and so on is defined. So that's good.
Yes. Yeah, there were so many changes here. I'm probably missing half of them when I'm talking about them, but yeah, that was one of them as well. But in terms of what we're seeing here for this drop-down, it was recommended to put in more than just minimal, moderate, extensive, and kind of quantify that a little bit. So here I just said less than a third and greater than 2/3.
What are you talking about now?
So hopefully you can see this, where the drop-down is for coronary classification.
Oh, I see, yeah.
This one said minimal, moderate, and extensive, and now it's quantitated with...
yeah, but moderate is 1/3 to 2/3, and severe is more than 2/3.
Right. Now, although it was specified just for coronary calcification, the same values were used in the aortic calcification. Does it make sense to have less than a third and greater than 2/3 here?
No, it does not.
Okay,
it does not.
That's easy enough. We'll just take that out. And then the visual CAC score is calculated here as well.
Okay.
And also, I believe the ratio is also calculated now as well. That was not happening in the previous version.
Right, and that pulmonary artery to aortic was an optional field. Is that optional? How do I tell if it's required or optional?
Well, this is a calculated field, so it's really not something you can enter, the ratio itself. It's really based on these two fields.
The pulmonary artery measurement and the ascending aorta measurement is something that we're doing, but it's really not required, and it's not routinely done by radiologists. So therefore, it should be an optional field.
Okay. We can easily make those options.
And then if you don't put anything in there, you don't calculate anything.
Yeah, it's just empty.
Because you have to be dividing by 0.
Yep. And let's see. Just going through my notes here quick. I think the only other, I don't think there's anything else on this tab, but if we can move over to impression and follow-up. We did add the lung rads section here. So you can pick
but the lung rads has to be a little bit lower because otherwise it gets confusing. It should be at the very bottom. It shouldn't be in between because the impression is actually, if it's a baseline scan, it's automatically done. And so the lung rads and the lung rads multiplier should be just above the follow-up. You see, all of this stuff is already, there's codes and there's a way that it looks in the structured reports. And so it has the nodules, it has the other findings, and it has the impression, which are remarks. And it should not have the lung rads in between. The lung rads maybe could be at the bottom, or it could be in a different tab. But it shouldn't be confused with what we have for the impression.
Okay, thank you.
So what I could probably do here then is really have a section, you know, see, this is really like a title for a question.
Why don't we talk offline? And then...
Sure. The other question I had, and I wasn't too sure, but I personally don't know much about lung rads, but I wasn't sure if you can actually have multiple modifiers. So right now they're checkboxes. If it makes more sense that you can only have one of them, we can change that to a drop-down.
No, there's a code like you have, the 3 or 4A or 4B, and then there are those other codes that we'll check, but I think you have it. There's 3 codes that you can give to everybody. The question is the way you have it. If I don't want to put C or S, what do you do?
Well, in a drop-down, you just wouldn't select something.
Okay.
But yeah, the question is, can you have both of these? Is that a possibility? Okay.
But it's a funny. Yeah, we'll have to check on whether those are the right whether the words are correct for that.
Yeah, I actually got that off the main website there.
Oh, well, then it's probably correct.
Okay, so now the follow-up, not too much changed here except for this little caveat on the top.
Okay, so that's, again, the lung rat has to go all the way behind the follow-up. The impression with the follow-up is all part of the original report.
Okay. So yeah, we can talk about that separately if it's either just below follow-up or even if it's a separate tab. That's fine.
Yeah.
But the one note that Linda had in her documentation is that you guys have some algorithm to kind of calculate what that follow-up should be.
Well, when you fill in the nodule grid, currently the way we have it working is when you fill in the nodule grid and you fill in everything to the bottom, it comes up with the impression, because you've given everything, and that's where I say it's very, you know, there's been a lot of work and effort and a lot of time and testing to put in this, and it also tells you what the follow-up time should be, and it gives you an automatic follow-up date.
Okay.
And the code for that we can give you, but we absolutely want that for the rollout in Phoenix, because all the baseline.
We have to be careful. This is Rick. We have to be careful with.
I understand, but we can. No, Rick. This is not the final report. Remember, the radiologist takes that report, and that's why it should be separated from the lung rads. Takes that report and cuts and pastes it, and then final report. Now we can put a proviso. This is based on. You know, we can put modifiers there, but they absolutely ask for having that because that would help them a lot. They understand that they're responsible.
Yeah. So let's discuss it a little bit further, just to make sure we're on the same page.
But no, that's a separate point. I mean, that doesn't need to be discussed now, does it?
I'd like to get all the features largely done by the latest.
Well, the features are that it does give you that automated report for the baseline. We've never done it for the annual repeat or for the follow-ups because it gets too complicated.
Yeah, let's take it offline. We can figure. I just need a little more guidance. Thank you.
Oh, you wanted to discuss it? I'm happy to take it offline.
Thank you.
So I think that sums up all the changes that I had to show today, and I don't think I have any other questions.
One other thing is that we did take the image quality tab off of here since it wasn't needed for this report.
This is Drew. Can I make a quick comment?
Well, that's not quite. There was the image quality that we had on our LCAP forms that was really not necessary. But there should be an image, a potential for an image quality calculated, like what Tony Reeves and Bob Sherrier was very interested in that. But that's, again, I think that's an offline discussion as to when that gets put in, and that's because that would that requires all sorts of different algorithms and so on. But the image quality assessment was something that was put in for somebody long ago for a specific purpose. So that's why that's eliminated.
Okay, thank you.
This is Drew. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, I just want to make a comment just to make sure folks picked up on it. So Claudia was pointing out that automating the baseline versus the follow-up scans, there are differences. Right, Claudia? You were saying that the other ones are not so straightforward and complicated. Did I hear you correctly?
That's correct. The baseline, because it's the first scan, there are no other scans. You put everything in the nodule grid. You can automate that, and after a lot of testing, we found that it works. But to think through all the combinations of any follow-up scan or even an annual repeat scan is not that simple, and that's something that we haven't. I wouldn't do because I just it would just take too long.
So I just wanted to springboard off of that to point out how valuable it is to have that kind of knowledge and background with that, because I think that without Claudia's guidance, we might go down a route and lose time trying to do something that she already knows is too challenging.
Gee, Drew, I like anything positive. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I think that sometimes what we're trying to do gets lost, and there's enough brain power. There's more brain power than any lung screening program could ever ask for with VA PALS.
So
great. So
everybody go ahead.
So Dom, we're looking at the end of this week to have a version that basically completes this, but doesn't talk to a VISTA database yet, right?
That would certainly be done by the end of the week. So there are a couple of minor changes that we talked about here, and I also mentioned that we wanted to have some kind of indication of what fields are required. That's got to be done as well. And then basically from there, it goes through a code review process, and then I'm going to hand it off to our Ben team to integrate it into the Vista system. So
right, there's one more
first part of that definitely done by the end of the week, for sure.
Yeah, there's one more thing, and that is that we need to take all of these data values and have a way of, basically a way of generating an automated report for a radiology report. So
for that we have all the text, and so we've as I said, we've tested that text, and that's why the maintaining of the fields is critical, and
right.
So that we can, and Arta can send you all the English text. So that shouldn't take that long. As soon
as we get that, we are prepared and have been doing our homework so that as soon as we get that text, we're ready to start working with it.
Right. Okay.
Now let's take a few minutes just to ask other radiologists on the phone if you can see what we're showing, the lung rads and all of that areas. Any comments from other people?
So this is Drew. I confirmed 2 different VAs. They cannot use WebEx, so Jeff actually signed off.
Oh, that's too bad. But had we known about this earlier, we would have switched to another.
Scott's on. I don't know. Scott, are you
anyway,
still
is there any radiologists? I mean, but I know lung rads. It looks that's what the report is summarized. The lung rads still requires a regular report, and then there's a category of 1, 2, I think maybe 0, 1, 2, 3, 4A, 4B, and those other designations that you had.
So Scott Akers is on. Scott, can you hear us? Can you see the screen? He's the radiologist in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
I don't see any indication that Scott has a way to talk to us. I think he's just...
Got it.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's
connected audio.
But we are certainly, as soon as we get all of the changes we've been given done, we are looking for direct feedback from radiologists.
Is there any way to print out the form?
Of course.
How would we do that? Because then it'll be a little easier for us to go through it, or at least for me to go through it.
When I did it, I just hit print when I was on each.
Okay, Arthur, is that all you need to do?
No, we need another couple days to wrap this up, and then we'll print it out for you, so you'll have a very early version. Okay.
So Rick, when you come on Thursday, that's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or sometime we can print it out.
If it's done. So let's just it might come in on Friday. Okay. So let's see what happens.
But there's no. I mean, I'm happy to give you my feedback. Or if it would be helpful.
We can print out what we have right now, but the
okay, and then I could fax it back or email it back to you.
Yep, sounds good.
I just called in again. Can you guys hear me?
Hi, yeah. You can.
Okay, fantastic. So this is Scott. So a question with so versus ILCAP versus lung rads. When we actually our report is generated at the very end with the impression, and hopefully we don't have to do any cutting and pasting. Will the lung rads category or the ILCAP category come up automatically, or do we have to calculate that?
Well, if you have a baseline CT scan, it would automatically come up with the impression. But if you're using lung rads, it doesn't automatically come up with an impression. You have to. I mean, you're not getting that automatically. How when you do your dictation now, how are you doing it? You actually dictate the code, right?
Well, we actually don't do lung cancer screening at this moment, but that's what we would do if we were doing it here. Yes. All
the other places that I know that use lung rads, they dictate the what it is. And that, so you, instead of, so it depends on whether there can be a template for this form. You could use a template because we found that we can export the fields from your dictation so that they will pre-populate the next time you have another CT scan on that person. So you can use a template, or you can do the clicking, which is what the ones in Phoenix decided to do. And then here for the lung rats, you would just click what the, you can just have the pull down, you can click whatever it is.
Okay. And this may be sort of crazy, but is it possible to combine the two? I was kind of thinking about this a little bit. Could you put ILCAP and lung rads together?
Well, tell me what you're really trying to get at. Are you trying to compare the two?
I don't know. It's just a thought. I don't actually even know what I'm trying to get at precisely.
No, I like the thought, and so what we have, and you know, but let's say if you're using lung rads, then you should put the lung rads. Those that are using ILCAP will do the ILCAP. But what we have, and that's where the fields are important, we have programs that will go through and will actually calculate what your lung rad should be, because the lung rads is kind of complicated. You have to look at the size of the largest part solid nodule and then the solid component, and then so there's a bunch of things that you have to really check. So you really have to have almost a program, which we have. So that would be an interesting part and part of a research that I think Bob Sherrier was interested in, and we're putting in a IRB to do that within the VA to actually do a comparison.
Okay. Yeah, no, that would be interesting. Okay. So you do it, but if you have a program that can calculate it, could we put that program together with this form so it spits out our lung rads number?
Well, it would be another whole step for them to do, for the team to do, which they hadn't done, and then it would be, we would need to go through a lot of validation to make sure that everything is correct.
No, okay. Okay.
Let me comment on that. This is Rick. So clearly, if there's an unambiguous algorithm that can take the data form field and convert it to a clear recommendation through lung rads, we would strive to implement it. But
let me just say, Rick.
Let me finish. Let me finish. But whenever you have software that makes potentially life and death recommendations, you run into potential issues with FDA and required FDA approvals. So we have to be careful.
This is a draft report, and perhaps at the top of this, when you use the click version, it should say draft report on the top or something to remind everybody that it's there. So there's certain things that you can do. But answering the question of the programming, it can be programmed, but it gets tricky because Rowena spent a lot of time. So it's not something that I think you want to easily put into at this time that you want to put in. But clearly over time, and the problem is the lung rads is going to change as well. So then you'd have to put in a whole nother program again. So once all of these things stabilize and everybody kind of gets more on the same page, then all of these things could be made very, very automatically. In fact, we already have a report that kind of takes a CT scan and comes up with a report that the radiologist could then look at. So there's lots of things that we can do once we, you know, as we put our heads together.
Another quick question. Do you have an estimate how long it would take to fill this particular form out for on average?
Well, we know because we've been using it for a long time, and for an easy case, it takes a couple of minutes. For a normal average case, it maybe takes, are you also talking about the reading of the film or just the filling in?
Let's say the whole thing, reading, average read, and filling this in.
Average read, and so for the read, of course, doesn't take a few minutes. It doesn't take a minute. It takes longer than that. So let's say that you have to look through the image. Let's say 5 minutes. If it's pretty simple, the form takes less than a minute to fill out.
Okay.
So the form is not what the time limiting thing is, that when you have a bunch of nodules that are big enough so you want to report them, then it takes a little while to fill them out and to make sure that they're all there. The advantage of having this form is when they come back, you already have them in order, and it automatically orders them by size. And so when you come back, and that's where they were saying, where it then has to save the data from the CT form, because it then pre-populates and it just says, has it changed or hasn't it? So the baseline filling out is the most tedious. The repeats are made much easier. And that's where the automated report, the actual structured report that the system generates, is useful, because what we do is we print it out and we look at it and we use that. You know, it makes it very fast.
But what if you have 22 nodules?
If you have 22 nodules that are greater than 3 millimeters?
Well, let's say you have 8. Do I have to report all 8?
So what we've always had gone up to 10. I don't know whether, Rick, what your limit is on the field. It's you can add different
10,
nodules.
I think we're up to 10.
10. That's what we've had, and that's worked on our 80,000 people so far. When you come back year after year, you might have a new nodule. So at some point you might run out, but you're really talking about nodules that you would, need to report on that change the recommendation on the baseline. So if you have tiny nodules, you just put in a field that said many calcified, non-calcified nodules less than 3 millimeters throughout all lobes, or something like that.
All right.
So is that Scott? Scott,
yes.
You're not far away from New York. We would love to see you up here. You could see the operation, or we could come down to your place. Either way.
Okay. Well, we'll talk offline on that too.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I think we've covered most of what we were shooting for. Linda, did you have anything else?
No, that was it. I just wanted to check and make sure that nobody else had a comment they wanted to add or a question they wanted to ask.
So, but you did a great job. Sorry about picking on little things.
Well, that's what we have.
It's looking very nice.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we need you to pick on the little things, because we are obviously not the experts in that part. We're the experts in making it so that you can see it and saving the data, but we're not the experts on how it should be laid out and stuff like that. So we can only give you, a draft and then ask you to nitpick it.
Okay.
So much appreciated. Okay, well, I think that's it sounds like. So I believe we're planning, we're planning on having a call next week at the same time, and we'll see what we have to show you then. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Linda, it's Sam. Are you still there?
I am.
So what's the plan